Hey friends, in the first episode of this two-part series, we learned about the conceptual framework behind building a CI/CD pipeline for your API management instances. In this episode, Meow is back to apply that knowledge and then demonstrate a sample implementation using Azure DevOps, and I'm going to learn all about it today on Azure Friday. Hey folks, it's Azure Friday. I'm here with Meow. We're in part 2 of understanding how to build a CI/CD pipeline for Azure API Management. If you found yourself here somehow and you didn't watch part 1, be sure to watch it. A lot of really good information about the problems and the solutions. I really like the way you broke it down. Like, these are some of the issues that you're going to bump into. Here is a conceptual solution, and now we're going to actually see an actual solution.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me. So in the last episode, we talked about the conceptual framework of implementing a CI/CD pipeline for API management. In this episode, I'm going to demonstrate a sample CI/CD pipeline that I implemented by following that approach. So let's say I'm an API developer, and for my organization, I just created a new API, right? So at this point, I've deployed the backend to Azure, and I'm ready to publish my API through API management. So I've done my research, so I've decided that I want to use Azure Resource Manager templates to deploy my API, right? And however, I'm kind of new to this, so it will take me some time to create my templates, my ARM templates, right? So this is where our automation tools, our DevOps resource kit comes into play. So in the first demo here, I'm going to show you how to use the creator tool to create an ARM template to deploy my open API specification file for my API. Okay, so let me switch to my VS Code. So as you can see, in my Explorer here, I have a folder called Food Trucks API because my API is called Food Trucks. Essentially, it returns a list of food trucks that are available, around our office, right? So as you can see, there are 3 files here. The first file is the Swagger file, the Open API spec for my API. It's very simple, right? And the second file here is an XML file, which essentially contains the policy that I want to apply to this API once it's published through API management. So it's very simple, just a rate limit policy, right, to add throttling capability. And also we have a YAML file here, which essentially is the configuration file for the creator tool. Essentially, it tells the tool how to create the ARM templates, right? As you can see here, I'm saying that for this API, please create an API version set. And this is all the metadata for that version set. And then here are more information about the API, such as name, version ID, revision ID. This is the link to my Open API spec. This is the link to that policy XML file. And then the suffix of this API, protocols, products, and so forth, right? So at this point, we have all the input files ready for the creator. So let's go and run it. So let me copy this command and paste here in my terminal and run it. Okay, so now as you can see that the creator is creating all different templates for this API. Now it is finished. So if I go to the templates folder here and the Food Trucks API, there are many templates created for this API. So I'm going to walk you through these templates in a minute, but before that, I just want to do 2 more things. The first thing is that if you remember in the conceptual framework, so we have a master template at a service level, which links to all the templates, right? So the first step I want to do here is to add 1 more step in my master template to include this API, okay? So let me add that, okay? So I just dropped in a new step to deploy the Food Trucks API. And now, supposedly, I have all my files ready. I can check in, I can commit my changes to my developer repository, which was cloned which was forked and cloned from the publisher repository, right? So let me add all my files and say, okay, added a new API, committed, and push to my developer repository, right? The reason I want to do it now because as soon as the changes are committed, it will trigger a build and release pipeline in my Azure DevOps pipelines, and it will take some time. So I want to kick this off first.
Good point.
So yeah, so at this point, while my build and release pipeline is running, so let me walk you through the files that were generated by the creator. So let's go back to the Explorer. So here are the templates. As you can see, the first template here is for the version set for this API, okay? And then we also have the initial API template, which essentially creates this API in API management with all the metadata, such as version, revisions, and so forth. And in the subsequent API template, it essentially imports the Swagger file into this API. And also it applies the policy to this API in the second step. And then finally, it's associating this API to the product called starter, which was all specified in my configuration file, okay? And finally, we have a master template for this particular API, which links to all the templates for this API, right? That's what I used in the master template for the service, okay? Okay, so now let's head over to my Azure DevOps. and see how our release pipeline is working. So if I go to pipelines, if I go to builds, here you can see the build pipeline for my dev instance is currently running, right? So if I show its definition, it's very simple. There are 3 steps here. In the first step, it essentially copies all my templates from my Azure repo into a storage account, because ARM cannot access my files in my private repository. So I need to copy those files into a storage account, right? And in the second step here, I'm using the Azure deployment step to actually validate the syntax of my templates. Because if you look at the deployment mode here, I'm using the validation only mode. So this does not actually deploy those templates. It just validates the syntax of my templates. And after that, it will publish build artifacts, right? So as soon as the build artifacts is published, it will trigger my release pipeline.
What is the artifact if you are only validating?
Yeah, it's essentially just the templates. It will move the templates into artifacts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So as soon as this is finished, it will kick off a release pipeline, which is currently running right now. So if I show you the definition of the release pipeline, it is super simple, just 1 step. Essentially, it uses the Azure deployment step again to deploy all my templates, right? So this time, instead of using the validation only mode, I'm actually using the incremental mode, which will actually deploy my templates, right? So
is it significant that you ran the creator on your local machine as a dev rather than checking in the...
Exactly. That's one thing I didn't do here. So you can actually build another automation process. So as soon as a new Swagger file is checked in, you can run the creator to generate the template.
So it depends on whether or not you want your API creators to have that piece abstracted away from themselves.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so you could add that as a stage in your pipeline depending on how you want to adopt or change this model.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Cool. So let's go check on our release. So it's still running, so it will take a couple minutes to finish. So let's assume that the release has finished and that we have tested our API in the dev instance and everything looks good, right? So at this point, as the API developer, I want to publish my API through the production API management instance, right?
Right.
But obviously, as we mentioned earlier, as the API developer, I do not have access to the production API management instance, right? So to publish my API to the production instance, I need to submit a pull request to the publisher repository to merge my templates, right? So let's head over to my Azure repos. And as you can see, it already knows that I've checked in something, so I can just create a pull request based on that. And yeah, so these are all the files I checked in. So let's just create a pull request. Okay, so as soon as this pull request is submitted, it will actually call a webhook that I implemented, which will validate the syntax of my templates and also check the compliance of my templates. So yeah, so we just heard back from the validator. So it says, okay, only HTTPS is allowed in protocols, right? So apparently I made a mistake somewhere, right? So let's go back to VS Code.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go back to VS Code, and if we look at my template here, right? So in the protocols, I said, okay, you only use HTTP, right? So this is the mistake I made. So let's make a change here to HTTPS, right? So let me check in the change again. Say, okay, changed protocol, okay, and push it to my repository. Okay, so the pull request should automatically pick up my change, which it did, right? So now the validation process is triggered again, right? In a few seconds. Oh, now it says, okay, approved for merging.
That was very fast.
Right? Yes. So at this point, my job as the API developer has finished, right? So let me change my hat here and say, okay, I'm the API publisher who manages the production API management instance, right? So as the API publisher, I just saw, okay, a new pull request came in, right? So I came to this page, and I saw that the validation process, said, okay, it's okay to merge it, right? I can also manually review all the files again, right? So everything looks good. Let me merge that. Okay, so as soon as this pull request is merged, it will trigger another build and release pipeline to deploy the changes to my production instance. The pipeline is very similar to my dev instance, so I'm not going to show you. Okay?
Of course.
So now you have seen the first demo, which essentially I used the creator to create templates to deploy my API, right? And also you've seen the sample CI/CD pipeline of how to deploy my templates to the dev instance and then promote that to the production instance. So as I mentioned earlier, we also have another tool called the extractor, right, which can extract your configurations into your templates. So I'm going to show you that. Okay. So let's head over to my API management instance. So this is my dev API management instance. Let me refresh this page. So as you can see, our food truck API has just been deployed here. And this is the food truck API. So in addition to the food truck API, we also have another API here called the demo conference API, right? So let's pretend that I manually configured this API through the Azure portal, right? And thank you. Yeah. So let's say I manually configure this demo conference API through the Azure portal, and I have tested it. Everything looks good, right? So now I want to migrate its configuration from the dev instance into the production instance. So I'm going to use the extractor to extract its configurations. Okay. So let's go back to the VS Code, and let me go to my script, copy this command. Okay. Let me enlarge the terminal here. Okay, so now I'm actually running the extractor. So as you can see, this is my development API management instance name, right? And I'm saying, okay, please extract this API, right? And please place the files into this folder, right? So, okay, now it's saying, okay, one API found. So these are all the operations under this API, right? And it should take a few seconds to run.
And to be clear, it's extracting it from a live running instance?
Correct.
And which APIs is it using to do the extraction?
It's our management API.
The management APIs.
Yeah. So behind the scenes, it's using our management API to get all the information about APIs and other entities.
Wow.
Okay. So now if we go back to the Explorer here, so under the conference API, you can see that a bunch of files have just been created, right? So this is the API template. You just close it. This is the API template, which contains all the information about this API, such as operations, things like that. And you can also see there is a policy folder here. Under it, there is a XML file, which is actually the policy for this particular API. So it's a lot easy for you to, it's very easy for you to edit your policy here, right?
Right.
And as you can see, I have a rate limit policy for this API. And in the counter key attribute, it actually uses a named value here called rate limit key, right? So if we go to the named value template here, you can see that the rate limit named value is actually here, right? It's because the extractor is smart enough to know that it needs to extract all the entities that are used by this API. So this is how you can use the extractor to extract your configurations from a live API management instance and migrate your changes to a different environment.
So then this becomes your new source code that you go and move forward from there.
Correct.
And all of this is available, and it's all open source. It's all part of the API Management Resource Kit.
That's right.
Okay, so folks go to aka.ms/APIM DevOps.
Correct.
And they can get involved, they can improve it, they can change it for themselves, and offer any thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. This is fantastic. I'm learning all kinds of great stuff about how to build a CI/CD pipeline for Azure API Management. I hope you've enjoyed both Part 1 and this one, Part 2, today on Azure Friday.